I ended up watching that movie, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Knock on the Cabin Door or something like that.
Oh, the one with Batista?
Yeah, the one with Batista. It's Dave. Why do you just call him Batista? It's
Because
Dave.
that's who he is. He's not just Dave. He is Batista. He will always be Batista, the animal.
The animal. Batista bomb! Oh!
Bro, I now that I think back, his intro would not fly today. Or his little entrance that he does with his pyro would not fly today.
What was his entrance?
Because he would like kind of do like a mini squat down and pretend like he's firing a machine gun like that, and the pyro behind him would just be going, and it was cool, right? It was back then it was cool, but now I'm thinking
Can
I would probably not see that today just because.
you imagine? He's just, yeah. And then there's some kid in the middle of Nebraska. I do this for Batista. Da, 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 da.
It's in my head, man. It's a repressed memory is about to blow up on me
It's in
like
your head. Yeah, it's in your head.
that. Okay, let me pull up the video so I just have it
Some
ready.
skinny, long-haired kid is gonna come out in your memory, in the ether of your mind, and
Mhm.
it's just kicking you on the ground. Memories where it just kind of like pops up, and I'm like, oh, that happened in my life. You ever
Every
have?
now every now and then it'll be the most random trigger too.
Yeah. I had a girl one time bite me and took a chunk out of my lip. This was in high school.
Okay.
And that was the most aggressive. I think even to this
Oh,
day.
I thought you were gonna tell me that her biting your lip made you have a memory while she was biting
No,
your lip.
no, that memory comes up every now and then. I'm like, oh, that happened. She was like making out with me and then she bit me on the lip.
Ouch. It's too aggressive.
Yeah.
That's way too aggressive.
And she was like, I just like the taste of cum. And I'm like, I don't know if that's gross or
I don't know if that's gross either, man.
yeah. So I blow my boyfriend every single day, multiple times a day. And I was a virgin still. And I was like, oh, really?
Title card.
Okay.
Hello, welcome to Boys on the Edge. This is our new episode, probably a little bit different than what you're expecting. NJ's laughing because I'm just doing this on the fly right now. I didn't create an intro. I'm just thinking about what to say as we
We've
speak.
literally been spending 12 minutes trying to figure out how to start this damn thing.
Because it's always banter and it's about to turn into banter because I know us. It's always just random talking and then we go into the subject. But you asked me today to kind of take the lead and bring something forth that I wanted to talk about. And so this video is a little bit different. It's the first time we're going to do our reactions and comments towards another YouTube video. Some people might be familiar with Vice's conservative Asians versus liberal Asians debate. It's a video that came out probably a month or two ago, and it caught some traction amongst right wing and left wing media. But otherwise, I feel like it's been relatively unnoticed. And so, but in that video, I think there's a lot of good talking points, specifically about Asian Americans living in this country and their experience, specifically in terms of politics too. There's a lot there to talk about. So I don't know, NJ, like I told you about this, and I know you watched the video a little bit. What's your like initial reaction to this
Headache.
video?
Headache.
Headache?
I
Why
had
a
a
headache?
headache.
Why?
Listen, I don't know, man. There's just some people where if I just look at them and they have the uniform of a leftist, I'm like, probably got some leftist ideas. And then they open their mouth and I'm like, I got it. Exactly right.
Mm, mm.
Exactly right.
Why don't you elaborate on the leftist uniform?
It's colored hair,
Hmm.
nose ring, shirt that might be a little bit too tight, like three sizes too small, you know, just a little bit of high pitched voice. I'm not gonna do the voice. I'm not gonna do the voice, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. You know.
I know what you mean, and I think people out there could maybe know what you mean too,
But
but no one's going to say it out loud. And it's hard to categorize too, right? I feel like a good go to though. You mentioned it. It's the completely dyed out hair. It's like all
mm-hmm.
pink, all green, all blue. There's like streaks going through. It's obviously not your natural hair color. It's for some reason in our eyes it's become like a beacon or like a badge that liberals wear just so you know right away where their ideology is at. Is it
I
just
don't
me?
think I don't think they wear it as like as like a B. It's not like a badge, you know. It's not like
Yeah.
a. It's
Sorry,
not like that.
that was too, yeah, that was too specific. I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? Like you said it too.
Yeah,
There's
I think there's just a specific type of temperament for someone to be liberal or have, you know, very left leaning beliefs.
mhm.
Um, and they tend to, part of that temperament tends to have, you know, very expressive, creative thoughts. I think I read somewhere that creatives tend to be a little bit more liberal. I just voting wise. There's literature out there somewhere, but it's not what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
You asked how I felt, and they started opening their mouths, and I was like, so
There's
I'm
there's there's some kind of bias or stereotype within me that wants to say that makes sense. But I couldn't really
in
tell
you,
you why.
some deep in you, some deep in you, man.
Could be hate, could be 100% hatred. I guess we'll find out.
You know, on the low, I really do think sometimes I have certain biases that if someone puts up an opinion, there's a part of me just kind of just pricks up a little bit and gets really
Mhm.
annoyed. So I have to really stop myself from doing that. But in any case, this is my first time watching this full video. So
Would you call what you just said, would you call that the urge to speak out?
it kind of an
On a
urge
very
to speak out.
general, like, overlaying term for it, like the urge to speak out.
Yeah, I just think they're wrong. It's like it's like imagine being a really great piano player. Like being one of the, you know, you know how it's done, you know how it's supposed to be. And then you hear someone go dun, 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 and it's just you just kind of get angry and you're just a little bit annoyed. Maybe that's not a that's not
Yeah,
a good
I don't see, you know
analogy.
what? Okay, I'll let you figure out your
I'm
metaphor
trying to figure out that
a
analogy.
little
But
later.
anyways,
Yeah.
it was just interesting, you know, when they said some opinions in the first 2 minutes, I was like, okay, see
Yeah.
where this is going. In any case, I want to see it. I want to see the full video.
Yeah, let's get started. So a couple questions first before I pull up the video actually. And also this video, like I said, is specifically about conservative and liberal Asians debating
Mm-hmm.
about the topics in the video. Vice also has videos on Black conservative and liberals doing, and Hispanic conservative and liberals doing the same thing. And those are actually longer videos, surprisingly. I would absolutely love to work with you and comment and react to those videos as well, because at least for the little snippets that I've seen from the other videos, it gets, at least for me, it can start hitting a bit close to home. But just like I'm kind of sure this video might hit close to home to you in some ways. All right. Um, so let's get started with this. Do you, NJ, do you identify as Asian American?
Do I identify as
Yes, and I'm just looking for a
Asian?
yes or no. Like if someone asked you, "Are you Asian American?" Would you say yes or no? Which might be
Um,
different questions, but let's go with the second one. If somebody asked you,
if someone asked me if I were Asian American, I mean, I'd say
Mhm.
yes. Yeah, I'm Asian
Yeah,
American. Yeah.
what does that mean?
What does it mean to be an Asian American? Well, it
Mhm.
means that I'm an Asian ethnically, you know, racially, I'm Asian, but I live in the United States and I identify as a citizen of the United States. That's how
Mhm.
I would view it.
Okay, would you
Mhm.
say it's particularly useful, or maybe personally important to you that you are Asian American?
For my taxes. I'm just kidding. Uh, for for my freebies, yeah. Personally, I don't know if it's really important to me to say if I'm Asian American.
Mhm.
I've never. I guess it's just my view of it, and maybe people have different views of it. I've never really taken pride on anything racial. Like I
Mhm.
never understood Filipino pride. I know some people. It's kind of weird because a lot of Filipinos.
Is that an actual thing, or is it more like a,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
is it more like just
There's
words?
no. There's very most Filipinos have a very strong belief that they should be proud to be Filipino.
Yeah, I guess
And
what I didn't mean to ask, is it an
uh,
actual thing that Filipinos are pride, or have pride in themselves for
yeah,
whatever
oh
reason?
yeah.
I guess what I meant to say was, Is that something I guess you've seen a lot of in this country?
Filipino pride?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And I
Yeah.
see it a lot back home. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't identify with it, I guess. I mean, I get it. And when I watch boxing matches, when Manny Pacquiao was beating the shit out of Mayweather, which isn't what happened, but I wish it did. I'm cheering, right? But I don't live my life daily thinking about the pride being an Asian American or being Filipino American or whatever whatever someone might say.
Yeah, one comment, and then I'm gonna go into the video and get
Uh-huh.
this thing started. I feel the same way about being Hispanic, specifically Peruvian. Both of my parents were born in Peru, this country in South America, for people who don't know. And it's not really a thing to say you're a Peruvian American, or even or even just straight up South American. Like you introduce yourself like, "Hi, I'm South American," or "I'm Peruvian American." It's not really true for me because I was born here. Both my parents immigrated here, then I was born here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always very connected with my Peruvian family. But in terms of, if somebody asked me, are you like Hispanic American, Peruvian American, Latin American? I've never, I guess I would typically choose the one that I feel was closest. And if it was just like one option and none else, then I would probably choose that one. But in general, I didn't use that as part of my identity. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't really have any pride in being a Peruvian necessarily. I had a lot of love for my Peruvian background, but to say that I had pride in it, the way that I think Black pride can take it, and Asian pride can take it, and the Hispanic pride can take it as well, this never really connected with me. So I think we're kind of on the same level there in terms of like, we don't really get it. We know it exists and people use it, but we don't really get it. Does that sound right?
So I'm wondering, because you brought up something that I just realized. If someone asked me, "Hey, are you Asian American?" I would say yes, I'm Asian American. But if someone asked me, "What are you?" or "What are you?" What nationality are you? What ethnicity? Actually, I'm just Asian. I'm Filipino. Yeah, I just don't. I don't need to be specific. I don't need to. If someone asks me, "Are you Asian American?" I don't need to go, "Oh, I identify as Asian." Or if someone called me Asian, I don't need to go, "Excuse me, it's actually Asian American," right? I think that's why. I don't believe, or at least for me, at least, and I could probably come up with like reasons as to why, but for me, at least, I don't really believe in the importance of that.
That's an interesting point that you just brought up, because that is something they touch on in the first part of the video. So on that note, then, how about we just get started? Let me pull it up. All right. So here's the video, NJ. Before we start, can you take a wild guess who the liberals are in this video?
Purple hair girl behind her.
How did you know?
Oh, dude, ripped jeans, white boots. Girl behind her, cargo pants. That cut is kind of typical of liberal college girls. Dude.
So you can't see him, but I would say the character of this video, one of the main story or main characters, I would say, is this guy in green. You can't see his face, but I promise by the end of the video, you're not going to be able to get this dude's face out of your head.
Oh my god. Okay. All right.
He is, without spoiling it too much, he is distraught at a lot of the things that our dude Vince back here in the suit says, because he just can't believe somebody would say that. But let's get started. Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire Democrat basically caucus in Congress literally bent the knee to George Floyd and to Black Lives Matter. They quite literally did that.
And that was a bad thing?
I think it was a stupid thing.
Hi, and welcome to our conversation about what it means to be Asian American. I'm Krishna. My parents came here from India. I was born here. So I identify as South Asian American or Asian American. And I just wanted to call out that we're talking about the largest continent on the planet with multiple countries, ethnicities. As we start, I want to get a think the term Asian American is useful. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got a couple 50-50s. What about
he's like, nope.
He's what?
My guy Vince, he's just like, he's the guy in the suit. I love how everybody raises their hand or kind of like meekly. He's just like, no.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what he talks about. And everybody's points are very interesting to some degree.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hear what they have to say.
Asian American Pacific Islander. I guess I'm curious to hear why, and maybe the way we can do that is going around the room and talking about who we are, where we came from, and what that term means to us, and what you think it might mean to the rest of the world.
I'm Yiling, and I would identify myself as an Asian American. I feel really strongly about being an immigrant. I'm first gen, or I say first and a half gen, because I was born in China, and then we immigrated to New York and then to San Francisco. And I think that the term Asian American is complicated because it applies to so many different identities, ethnicities, and cultures. It's a helpful term when, you don't really know what else to you just lump everybody into one term. And I don't think there's any issue with it being Asian American and Pacific Islander either, because that's just more inclusive in my opinion.
So I'm always confused when I hear Asian American Pacific Islander.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's actually a really big, or that's actually two different groups that you're just putting together in the same hyphen category, whatever. And I don't understand it. I can clearly understand that people who are Filipino can maybe fall under the classification of a Pacific Islander.
Yeah.
But that's not the majority of Asians.
Yeah,
right?
it's Pacific Islander is it's Southeast Asians is what they are. It's the people in the little dot at the bottom of mainland China. Those are the
southern China.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. It's weird because Samoa.
It's not actually China. It's actually these other countries, these other ethnicities, right?
Yeah, they're different countries, absolutely.
Okay.
But China believes they're China, but that's a whole different story.
So thank you for that clarification. I really didn't know that there was.
Yeah,
I guess there was Pacific Islander had a slightly closer meaning that I actually
but
initially
see,
realized.
It's weird because they consider Samoans Pacific Islanders,
mm-hmm.
which is their culture is a little bit different from
a little bit,
a lot of it different from someone who is in, for example, the Philippines. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different, but it's a lot of bit different than someone who would be in Korea. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But they're clumped into the same thing. So it's weird. I don't know why they do that, but I don't know who votes for that. I don't know. Because that was weird for me.
There is no voting. They just choose.
They just choose.
They just say it enough and then they choose it.
Yeah. Because I used to do the bubble test on the test. Mm-hmm. I would bubble it in and I would always put Asian. And then there was this other thing. It says Pacific Islander. Because they got rid of the other section. They used to have other, and I used to be like, oh, maybe I'm other. I don't know. I just remember that.
I actually wondered about that too when I was younger. All right. Let's keep playing.
I was born in Manila, Philippines.
Interesting. And what does that heritage mean to you?
I'm a little conflicted because sometimes I just want to be American. I don't want to specify the fact that I'm Asian, but at the same time, it's like someone looks at you, they're going to say that you're Asian, so you say you're Asian American. I don't like the idea of separating the Pacific Islander just because for so long I was told I wasn't Asian, that I was a Pacific Islander. I just think it's all encompassing, we are Asian.
Micah.
I feel very prideful about the Asian Pacific Islander. I live in San Diego now, but I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and my dad's born and raised from Kona. I am so close with my family. Just growing up, it's hard to explain, but being from Hawaii, the aloha spirit is real. Being around your family, having that common courtesy for community is just something that I'm really proud of.
And you feel like, as it relates.
Yes.
The guy in the suit is literally just deadpan. You can tell he's not into this conversation.
He will talk about it. He does.
Yeah, I can just tell. I just wanted to bring that up because he was so funny. Anyways, all right, keep going.
to Asian American and Pacific Islander? These are two things that kind of go together in some ways?
Yeah, they do. They do.
How?
So the thing about Hawaii is that it's a really huge collection of different types of ethnicities, and there's a lot of Asian influence in Hawaii as well. A lot of different people who are there are from Korea, China, Japan, and so I just consider them family as well.
Well, good to meet you. Tell me about yourself, Vince.
Genetically, I'm a quarter Italian, 75% Vietnamese, but I am really with Teddy Roosevelt on this one. I don't believe in the hyphenated American thing. I identify as American. I consider myself an American. Sure, genetically, I'm mostly Asian. I don't go around thinking I'm an Asian American, because I think that, especially considering the fact that America today is increasingly a more and more diverse country, which is what it is, the only way that's going to hold together is if people can, to some extent, all identify as being part of the same nation, part of the same creed to an extent. I mean, that's just the way I would view it.
Vish, you're up.
I'm 100% Hindu Indian American. I was born in Brooklyn. My parents are from India. I personally just describe myself as American. I find, like Vince said, you know, the hyphenated American thing, I think it's by definition divisive when you're dividing the identity. I prefer to call myself American. I don't call myself Indian American, Asian American, though when people ask, like, oh, well, what are you? I'll say, well, I'm of Indian heritage, but I was born in Brooklyn.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna. Sorry, I wanted to make sure. I already forgot his name. I want to make sure my guy here finished his point, because he's pretty much in agreement with Vince. It brought up my next question. Do you see the hyphenated use of like Asian American, Hispanic American, Black American? Do you see that as useful?
Do I see it as useful?
Yeah.
I don't know how useful it is. I mean, if I look at someone, like, I could tell they're Black and they're in America. So you're Black American. You know, if I look at someone and I could tell they're Asian, you're an Asian American. I don't know how useful it would be to announce that you are blank American.
It shouldn't be, right? Like, it shouldn't give an advantage or disadvantage to, you know, to be Asian American, Black American, white American, whatever, right? It shouldn't make a difference. I can see it being useful in terms of metrics. Like, I know there's a lot of metrics out there that are like how heart disease affects Black Americans over white Americans a lot more. You know, statistics like that. So it can be useful, but in very specific ways. But I would say in general, like everyday life, in the way like you and I just living our everyday lives, I don't see it being useful at all.
Yeah, to what extent? You know, I'm not just that I'm against, you know, I'm against the importance of race in interacting with someone, but to really what extent am I going to interact with someone and them saying I'm a Black American is going to change how I interact with them, when clearly you can tell if someone's Black American or Black, right? You just look at them and you can tell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's say you're wrong. Let's say, you know, it's one of those vague ones, you know, one of those vague ethnicities. Like why should that change how you interact with that person?
Yeah. So quick yes or no then. The use of hyphenated character classifications like this, Asian American, Black American, does it make our country more divisive?
Does it make our country more divisive?
Let's go. Yeah, let's. My quick answer would be yes, because I feel like there is solely having recently gone through college, there seems to be, at least in terms of our young adult group, our age group, our generation, a lot more importance in some people to say that to be prideful that they are Black or Asian or white even. I feel like that just makes us more divisive. Like, sure, like you are, like that's your skin color, that's your ethnicity, that's your background, but that shouldn't divide us. It should just serve as it should just serve as an additional example that this country is very diverse, and our diverseness does not mean that we have to be separated.
Yeah, no,
or that we should be.
I don't know if the hyphen itself, you know, the Asian American, Black America, you know, I don't know if I agree that it's divisive just by itself.
I guess I'm taking it to a much further extent. If we're just talking about like the word itself and how someone identifies, yeah, probably not very divisive.
Yeah, you know, I think I think there is a lot of value into retaining some of your culture, right? And some of your traditions. I think there's a lot of value to that. And that's it naturally, I think, happens. That's why you can't really take away fully someone's culture, because their parents kind of pass it down to them, right? It's a lot of it is passed down by your parents. And the further away you are from the people that moved here, I guess it kind of gets diluted, but there's still parts of it that's just there.
Yeah.
Right. There's just parts of it that's just there. Like I'd like to consider myself as very Americanized, very acclimated to American culture, but I can tell there's parts of me that's just, I got it from my parents. And if I talk to my Filipino friends back in the Philippines, I can tell that I get where they're coming from, and I understand it. So there's things, there's things that I can see it's still there. And it's hard to take away.
It's good you mentioned that too. That's another point in the video that comes in later on. Americanization, assimilation into American culture, going back to World War II days, maybe even before that, and how it's affected Asian Americans in this country today. That's something we'll touch on. And there was something and I wanted to give a quick example of where I see divisiveness when we use these hyphenated words, and then let's hop back into the video. So in this most recent midterm elections, the trend of a grand majority of Black and Hispanic voters always voting for Democrats essentially broke. Like, there was a record number of Black and Hispanic voters voting for Republican candidates, for conservative candidates. And the trend that came before that, where I feel like if you grew up Hispanic or Black, there's probably a good chance that you were getting a lot more liberal Democratic influence, and you were maybe being told that the Democrat politicians are always the ones that are looking out for you. They're the ones that have your best interests at heart. That's just 100% not true. And I feel like the more you grow, the more you mature, the more you're going to see that. And that's the example I could think of off the top of my head in terms of how using this hyphenated classification can be a little divisive, because, like I said, there was this expectation or this trend of Black Americans, Hispanic Americans voting Democrat, and even that's broken. So now that's even that's divided into even more so the Democrats and Republicans between these two minorities.
I think so. I think I can see why that you can argue that that's divisive in that way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You want to go back to the video?
Let's hop back in. This is going to be a long video. It's okay.
Also, like my experience, my mom is from Japan. She immigrated to America. So I do truly feel that I am a part of the Asian American experience where, at home, it's a Japanese household. It's a Japanese culture, because I was predominantly also raised by my mom too. And then also we happen to live in America. And I think there is a very unique perspective in that. As well as I'm a proud Asian American, I'm a proud Black American too. I'm a proud biracial American. And I think there is definitely also a need for us to be able to say Asian American, especially because we are often seen as not American or not American enough. But then you go back to Asia and they're like, oh, you're so American. So it's just like, well, who am I?
Being between cultures in a way, or straddling cultures, being part of two cultures.
Yeah, being part of two cultures. I'm Asian, I'm American, I'm Asian American.
Well, nice to meet you. Joyce.
So I'm a Taiwanese Asian American. I identify as Asian American, but at the same time, I think the term Asian American and Asian Pacific Islander, they have to be separated, because when we go to colleges and apply to get in, we're on different socioeconomic pathways. So actually the term Asian Pacific Islander would actually get you in more than someone just does East Asian, because I believe now they separate the two.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think that's what we'll try to do today. But it's good to meet you. So I guess this is a funny question, but do you think the average American, when meeting you, would be like, oh yeah, you're Taiwanese?
No, they think I'm Chinese. I'm Japanese or Korean, but basically I'm Asian. They always ask where am I from because of the way I look.
And they ask where are you really from?
Yes. And I'm always, I'm American.
I get that a lot too. Helen.
Hi, my name is Ellen. I'm Korean American. I came from Korea when I was 8 years old, got on a plane by myself, not speaking a word of English, didn't know white people were real. For me, it was huge culture shock. My parents had already immigrated, so I was joining them. I like to be identifying myself as a Korean American woman, and I recognize the importance of Asian American Pacific Islander. Definitions are always constantly changing as we as society constantly evolving. I don't like to just consider myself American because when anybody in this country looks at me, they don't just see American. They always see Asian first. Instead of using that as a thing that holds me back, I say it proudly. And it's taken time to accept my identity, to really know that that's sort of an umbrella term to open the door into the conversation. I know it's not possible to encompass all of us because Asia's so big, right? But in order for us to be seen and heard, we have to start somewhere. So I think it's a good term for that.
I'm Ziad. I use he, him pronouns, and I am Bangladeshi American, and I'm Asian American. The reason...
Please, I needed like a breather before this guy starts talking.
Did he just...
Two things that she talked about. I'm curious about this.
My pronouns are he, him. But I know you asked what my ethnicity is, but I'm he, him. I was like, what?
He's the only one who did it. He's literally the only one who did it.
Yeah, you can tell too by his voice. Oh, that voice.
It gets more.
Ziad. That's such a very interesting name. All right. What were you gonna say?
Two things that our purple hair friend said. I can't remember anybody's name, bro. I remember Vince and Joyce.
Joyce, yeah, Joyce is the Asian girl that was.
She's the Vietnamese one on the end.
Yeah, Vietnamese one at the end. Yeah,
and Vince is the guy in the suit from Florida. Everybody else, I remember their ideologies, but I don't remember their names.
Yeah, let's just talk about the color of shirts that they wear.
Okay, so I'm gonna call purple hair. Purple hair. Call her that. So purple hair, she mentioned she recognized the importance of Asian American Pacific Islander, but I didn't catch it, at least. Didn't go into what that importance is necessarily. I have a feeling the answer to her is just diversity and inclusion and recognition. But how is that important necessarily?
So it's all vague, you know. So they're talking about something, and I feel like who was that girl that said it's hard to explain because you have to feel it? And I'm like, well, why are we talking about it? If you have to feel it, why are we having a Vice video about it when you can't really talk about it? You know, it's vague. It's in the ether, right? Like, what does it mean for something to be blank American versus just that ethnicity, right? Like, what's the difference between someone who's black versus black American, right? Like, and nobody can fucking explain it. Nobody can explain it because it actually isn't it. The black American is it's interesting to me because if someone is black and they're in America, chances are they're black American, right? Like, it would be different if I were in Europe and I have to specify, oh, I'm black American because I'm in Europe, right? If I'm black, not right now, I would never identify as black American in Europe. But do you get what I mean? Because you're in America and you're black, so what are you if not black American?
It's like, for some reason, once you're in this country, you have to get really specific about it.
Yeah, I don't.
You have to use it. Like, I don't really, and if you don't have that banner to fall under, then it's a form of oppression that you don't have it. The fact that you're not recognized or that you're not represented. That's the word I was looking for. The fact that you're not represented. Like, I feel like the drive, they get into this in the video too, the drive of diversity and representation is only as important as, how do I say this? It's not that important, at least to me. Like, I didn't need Hispanic role models ahead of me to get where I am today. I simply had role models. Maybe some of them were Hispanic. I honestly don't remember. There's a lot of people in my life who have influenced me. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yeah.
But their race was never like a big thing. It was just like, I like this hobby, this thing, this interest that this other person's really good at, and they can teach me about it. I didn't really care about their race. maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just us.
Well, it's the thing too. You know, why does it matter? Why does the specification matter? Why can't you just say if you're Asian, right? Like me, why can't I just say I'm Asian? Why do I have to say Asian American? Right? Like why is there such a big they're making a big deal out of it? Not, you know, because I don't see the difference between someone who's Asian in America versus Asian American. What's the difference? Like what is, like, legitimately, I'm not making fun of it right now. What is the difference? What's the difference between someone who's Asian in America and someone who's Asian American?
I guess to me they sound like the same exact thing. Like,
yeah, like
what difference could there be besides maybe the person who's Asian and living in America is this old Japanese woman who only recently moved here, and she's just so connected with Japan culture, she can't conceive of herself being an American or a Japanese American. That's like a really like niche case. Probably doesn't even, like, it's not realistic.
She's just Asian in America.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. There was another point that Purple Hair was talking about, but I already forgot it. Let's just keep going to.
Let's watch Zayad Zayn.
Take a deep breath. It's about to get annoying.
I can tell.
Why I is lukewarm about the term Asian American insofar as its usefulness is that I don't actually often refer to myself as Asian American, despite like fully believing that I am, because to Yuling's point, oftentimes I think people have a perception of what Asian American looks like, right? And sometimes that leaves out South Asians, sometimes that leaves out Central Asians, sometimes that leaves out huge parts of the world. Me personally, like, I lean into my hyphenated identities, right? I am American and I am Muslim and I am Bangladeshi and I am Asian, right? And I am all of these things at once, and I'm not one more than the other, but I take pride in all of these things. And I think that for me, I find power in that insofar as when I look at this country, I think it is so damaging, right? So saddening that sometimes this country makes us choose.
I mean, what you point out is that we kind of all have.
All right.
You first.
So, there's one point that other girl, Japanese, half black girl, that he kind of made. It's that this country makes us choose. It's that this they who the hell is they?
I hear that so much. I think there was something Purple Hair said. She also said like they make us, or they don't feel, or they oppress. Like, I forget. She said something with they, but yeah, there's this like omniscient force, according to liberals, that make them choose, that make them assimilate, that make them do these things supposedly. When no, like nothing. Yeah, nobody's making you choose. You may feel pressure from the culture that you live in. You may feel pressure from, like, just your environment, your location. Nobody's making you choose. I know it's hard. I know you're going to feel alone, but nobody's making you choose. It's not oppression. It's the fact that you yourself are not a white American. You didn't like they get into this later in the video. This country is predominantly white people. Wherever you go, you're more than likely to find a majority of white people. And so to sit there and say that I was forced to choose between identifying or not identifying in these things that are typically non-white, that's just not true. You may have had some sort of societal peer pressure to act less like your background and more like the white people you hang out with, but that was not forced upon you. It's simply the culture that you live in.
Yeah, but that's true. That's true of anything. If you're the odd one out, right? Like if I as an Asian hung out with a bunch of Hispanics, I'm gonna try to mimic them so I can be accepted, right? Like that doesn't have to do with American culture. It's just
but when you word it that way, that's where they have the problem, right? Because they switch out a Hispanic for white, because that's where this video is going to go in a little bit. They make the point of assimilation and whether it's good or bad, and like to what degree also, because you can like fully assimilate and just completely, for Zihad specifically, that was his name, right?
Who?
The guy in the green shirt. This is
Zayad.
Started
with a Z.
Whatever, racist right here because I picked a name that sounded like it fit. Sorry.
Did you say jihad, Brian? That's messed up. Say jihad. You heard Muslim and you're like jihad.
No, I said zihad, but
apparently
zihad doesn't exist. Anyway, what was I getting at? Oh shoot, what were we getting at? I just got distracted.
You got into the point of assimilation into white culture.
Yeah, so like you were
And to
saying,
what extent?
if you're the odd one out, of course you're going to feel some pressure, but it's not oppression. It's just the fact that this country has a lot of white people, has the majority white people. Maybe not in California in certain parts, and maybe not in other parts of states where there's predominantly Black or Hispanic or Asian. I don't know. But like, I feel like so many liberals are blind to the fact that this is a predominantly white country. And or even worse, they're not blind to it, but would rather use that fact as white supremacy and white versus minority oppression and all these other causes of evil things and things that make them choose and things that make them like go away from their culture.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. There's just such a lack of understanding of dynamics of people. Cause like if you look at in the East Coast, right? There's Jewish white people, and then there's Italian white people, and then there's Irish white people. And those three cultures are completely different. And they actually clashed a lot of times, right? So it's not just like a white culture thing. If you want to get even more specific, right? There's just if you're an Italian and you live in a predominantly Irish area, for you to not be the odd one out, you gotta assimilate, right?
Yeah. And let me take it to one more example, and then we should hop back into the video. Can you imagine me as a Hispanic male, I suppose? But imagine I come from a very Peruvian proud neighborhood. And everywhere I go in my neighborhood, like there's always people who are also Peruvian speaking to me in Spanish, giving me Peruvian food, telling me about Peruvian culture, all that good stuff. And I think like this is so great. I want to feel represented wherever I go. Now imagine I go to Europe and expect the people in that country to not only acknowledge that I am Peruvian American, but to now change their norms because I should be more represented in this country because I'm here now. And the culture around me should be more accepting of my beliefs and my feelings, as opposed to me entering this foreign country and this foreign culture and me having to now assimilate a little bit because it's their country, it's their culture, it's not mine, and they're the majority. And the good thing is I don't even have to do that. Yeah. But if I don't want to stick out all the time, I'm probably going to assimilate a little bit. I feel like that's something that liberals don't consider.
That's my question, is like, to what sense are people changing their culture? You know, like can I get a very exact interaction, an exact example where someone who's, culturally Asian gets ostracized and ousted because of something that they did? Like anything that these people experienced that they feel like they were forced to change and assimilate into a culture, and to what culture were they forced to assimilate to? There's just so much vagueness to the whole talk that there's nothing, no examples that they're giving that's exactly, hey, here's what happened, right? And here's how it panned out, and here's how I changed culturally because of what happened to me. There's just, I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard specific examples. There's just vague generalizations that maybe it's not true, because nobody's forcing anybody to change, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of assimilation in the sense that we got to work together because we're so diverse culturally in the United States. Like, this is the first time in human history where there's so many cultures in the same place. And those cultures a lot of times clash, right? But we're getting along fine.
Yeah, for
right?
the most part, yeah.
For the most part,
that's another point in the video. Also, I'm happy you're having these thoughts because you're very much ready to have this conversation.
All right.
It's
pissing me off already.
Let's just keep going.
Have a dual consciousness, or are dual citizens of this country and the world, which is to say we go home, we might have a different culture, a different food, a different language that we speak. We go to school. And we have friends who might not share or understand what that language culture is. And we have a desire to both be true to the heritage, but then also be accepted, successful, and otherwise in the non-Asian American world that we live in. Assimilation. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a burden? Is it an opportunity?
Assimilation, I think I would define that as, in part, I think necessary to an extent because we are forced to in order to navigate this country. So I would say learning the language, learning how to properly behave, for example. That's in part kind of assimilation, making sure that you are
in line,
kosher in this society. And I think in part that means survival.
I think assimilation is not just a great thing, it's a necessary thing. No society can hold together where people have nothing in common, they don't speak the same language, they don't practice the same things. And you may look at something like just food habits or what you eat and think that's fairly frivolous, but the truth of the matter is that on a broader level, when we're talking about more big picture things, differences in race, culture, religion, all these things, people have fought wars, violent wars, killed each other over these things for thousands of years. If America is to hold together, assimilation, not just good or bad, necessary. I don't think it's going to be possible for America to survive as a stable, functioning society if people don't, to some degree, say, well, here's what we're going to commonly agree upon.
But who gets to choose it?
The majority culture, I suppose.
And what's majority culture?
The people with power.
And who's people with power?
Who's people with power?
White people.
Well, I don't know if that's.
I'm gonna say it.
Yeah.
White people. It's okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, she's so annoying. White people.
White people. It's okay.
White people.
White people. White people.
Congratulations, you figured out there's a majority white people in the United States. Wow.
Well, see, that's what's interesting is that nobody had to force anybody. Nobody made laws for us to have to do certain things.
Yeah, and barring something extreme, like if Asians were known for always setting off fireworks at 11:46 p.m. every single night because that's how they did it in their home country, they probably have to cut that out because that's not something we typically do in this country.
Yeah,
and
but see,
that's
the
a complete
thing.
fabrication of my mind. But to bring the point home, right? There's certain assimilation you have to do, and the fact that they would rather view that as who are the people in power, who's in control, who's in charge, who's oppressing us. I know they didn't say oppression specifically, but I know that's what they're actually thinking.
But power, see, that's the thing. It's a power dynamic, right?
Yeah.
See, nobody forced anybody to act a certain way here, right? Like there's no laws that. Oh my God, her face is like right on my. Oh my God, so annoying. Nobody forced anybody, and that's what's so interesting about like the American experiment, because this, at the end of the day, this country is a very big social experiment. We put a bunch of people in one place and we let them, we didn't force them to follow any norms, to follow any rules that abandons their culture. We didn't do any of that, right? And yet we still thrive. We get along. The fact that a Hispanic person, a Muslim person, and I just say Muslim, and a Middle Eastern person, right? And even the fact that Muslims and Christians and atheists and all those types of people can sit in one room and be civil.
Vince is literally about to say that.
Yeah,
he's literally about to say, like, if we were in a white supremacist country, we wouldn't be sitting here being able to do this.
Yeah. But that's the thing, Vince. I think Vince should have just said, right? Like, this assimilation naturally happened, right? Naturally, everybody agreed that there were certain things that we need to do in order for us to get along, right? Naturally, nobody made a law that there's no Chinese food places in this area, right? Nobody made a law to do that. Right? Naturally, we just got along. Do you know why? Because the government didn't do anything. The government said, this isn't our thing. And we just let people talk it out.
And I think something important that goes along with that is there have been world events like World War II, which will be brought up later in this video, that absolutely perpetuated a negative stereotype, a negative view of Asian Americans by Americans. Now, that is a very specific example, and it definitely had some long-term effects down the line. But
what's the long-term effects?
I would say the long-term effects, at least from there, is that there was a stigma, and there was and something else they bring up too. I'm going to get to both of these. There's a stigma, and that there was also the model minority myth, that in reality there is a proper way for these minorities to behave when they're in America. They're not going to be trouble. They're not going to be dangerous. They're not the propagandized Asian Americans, Japanese Americans from World War II. And that stigma of Asian people being dangerous, that probably carried on for a little bit after World War II. I have no proof of that. I'm just kind of speculating here. I'm spitballing. I'm guessing that after World War II, if you saw an Asian in America, there was probably some mixed feelings, or there was at least like some curiosity, like I'm surprised you're here. And to me, that's maybe that might be lightly racist, but it's also not that big of a deal. And in terms of like the long term down the line, I really couldn't give an example.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if what you're saying is true, because it's not like they came here all of a sudden. Like some of these people that during World War II, some of the just Japanese people that lived there in the same neighborhoods have lived with white people for years and years and years. So it's not like, I don't know exactly if it's true, because they've been so embedded into the society before World War II, right? They've been so embedded. They've been part of churches. They've been part of the community, right? So I, not necessarily saying or agreeing that what they did was, right or wrong. That's a whole different conversation.
Internment camps were for sure wrong, and that's something else they're going to get to.
Yeah.
And it's, you and I have talked about this a little bit. A statement that sounds so easy to wrap your head around, that it has to be true, when in reality there's no proof of it, right? So,
well, if you just do, if someone just dives in a little bit to that statement, right? Like, think about who these people are that were put in internment camps. They're not just people that crossed the border or got here by boats the year of World War II, right? They've been here. A lot of these people have been here for decades. So like, I want you to imagine if, let's say you have a Japanese friend, right, that you've grown up with for years and years and years, and their parents are part of your church, right? And, they're part of the community. They own a business in the community. And then all of a sudden we go to war to Japan and they get sent to internment camps. I mean, or number one, let's say take out the internment camps. I wouldn't immediately think, oh, this person is a Japanese spy, right? Like, because they've been such a big part of our community, right? So I don't know if that's true, and maybe there was some sentiment on that. Like if I saw a random Japanese person in the street during World War II while we were fighting Japan, but I don't know how much of it would be that. And
I'm sure there is a sentiment, an emotional part of it that some Asian Americans maybe still hold some kind of grudge or some kind of resentment towards what happened back in World War II because of the internment camps. But again, that's kind of like my first statement where I said that there's been long-term effects from the internment camps. I don't really have a proof of that either. It just sounds like something that has to be true. It sounds true that Asian Americans long-term have been affected by the internment camps of World War II. It sounds true. It could be true, but the fact is I don't have proof of that. And I feel like if that was ever brought up as a subject by someone else, asking them for proof, they wouldn't be able to think of anything, substantial either.
Yeah, but that's this thing. It's morally wrong. I agree. It's morally wrong. Internment camps are morally wrong, right? But the other part of that argument is, because it's morally wrong, it has a causal negative effect, which isn't always true. Right? Like you have to prove that they're not tied in together, and we can think of many, many times where something was done to a group which is morally wrong, but didn't have a causal negative effect. And people just kind of spout that out all the freaking time, when it comes to Asian Americans or Black Americans or transgender people, right? They just spout it out because it feels right. And here's the thing. You shouldn't make laws based on what feels like it sounds right.
Really so true. I mean,
Wait, can you
look
unpack?
at,
Yeah.
Let's elaborate.
I don't think a particularly white quote unquote interest controls things like
In America.
pop culture.
Do you believe white supremacy exists?
I think there are people who believe in it. I think there's people who all believe that their race is superior.
So you don't believe in white supremacy?
Do you believe America is a white supremacist state?
No, not at all.
And not found
No
in
white supremacist state would even like allow us to be doing this. Like I don't understand. It's a white supremacist. There's just KKK people walking. Actually, I go around New York City. I notice that, like, I guess Brooklyn a little bit different. Most of the people here are not white, and they're doing their thing. So I don't understand.
What does doing their thing mean to you?
Going to work.
Are they making the same amount of money? Are they getting the same access to opportunities?
I think they're getting great access to opportunity.
Please unpack it. Are they equivalent? Are communities and communities that are leading culture, to your point, because you pointed to popular culture as something where, in your view, white people don't have the power, when the reality is it is the white executives who are profiting off of and exploiting predominantly black and brown bodies for their financial gain to then parade to us and tell us that we're thriving, when the reality is it is women of color, and it is black folks, and it is Asian American folks, and it is Hispanic folks, and it is people from marginalized communities who are disproportionately being impacted by every adverse thing that society is facing, while the few at the top who don't represent our communities are profiting. There are massive disparities based on race, based on class, based on gender, based on all of these things that shouldn't exist.
Well, nobody denies that there's disparities or that.
Well, let's have Vince respond.
All right, so that's what's interesting, is that and this is my problem. And if you're liberal and you believe these things, I'm going to talk to you right now. Just because there's disparity doesn't mean that there's inequity, right? Here's the thing. If you compare Mexicans with Japanese people, there's huge disparity in their earnings, right? But just because there's disparity, those two groups have not had any interactions whatsoever. So to say that there's disparity and all of a sudden there's this whole system that's been rigged in the case of white people, we had a black president, for crying out loud, right? The fact that there's disparity doesn't always mean that there's inequality, right? Or sorry, there's inequity, right? Mm-hmm. And he threw out race, he threw out gender, he threw out all the big issues, right? Mm-hmm. But he doesn't give exact examples, right? The fact that there's a white CEO making millions of dollars, how does that help the white redneck in the South?
I feel
there's
like
a minority of white men. So I'm really frustrated right now because there's a minority of white men that are on the top. But to say that fact trickles down to the white Southern redneck that lives in the middle of nowhere and is in food stamps and welfare, and for somehow that's rigged the system for that white person. How does that rig the system for a white person? How does a poor white person that makes less than a black kid in Compton, how does that system help them? It's not rigged for white people.
To me, I really only hear deep self-victimization for the fact that he lives in this country and there are still a majority of white people. I can totally see his observation that there's a lot of white people in charge, like in politics. There's a lot of white people in politics, obviously. There's been a lot of white CEOs, a lot of white male CEOs. There's been these specific people that have been in power. I get that.
But because Asians don't care about politics, dude. We don't care about politics.
Hold on, let me finish my point. I get that he's observed all of that, and it's for some reason in his head, the fact that it's not someone who looks like him doing all those things. That's the disparity, or that's causing disparity. That's oppressing people to not be able to get as far as these white people were able to.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case.
It's not all white people. It's not all. It's a very small group of white men that have that, that are the CEOs, right?
Yeah.
It's a very small group, and to say that that's rigged as the entire system is rigged for white people, is just not true. Because the majority of white people are not rich and CEOs. And that's just not the case.
Yeah,
and to say that it's just not true.
It's like, it's for some reason liberals are so obsessed with the image, with the cover of the book. You know, they're so obsessed with who's on the cover of the book or on the cover of the magazine, but they never actually open it and read about it and find out what's actually going on, or at least consider for once that they're not the victim.
Yeah. Well, you can tell he has a very big sense of heroism, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm the hero because I'm giving you. It's the most white men are the ones that are making the money off the backs of these minority women and minority blacks, right? And men that are despair, and it's just not the case, right?
Yeah.
If you really, if Vince, you know, if Vince wasn't like surrounded by all the crazies, I would have told him to just poke at it. All right, well, besides those three, you know, the top 1% of white males that are making all the money, what happens? What's with the other poor white people that are in the same boat as everyone else?
Yeah.
Right? It's a small, very tiny minority of white people.
Like I said, it's such a focus on the cover, on the image that they are perceiving, and then they just proceed to make their story from there, when it's just not the case, and there's no real evidence to help back them up. And if there is any kind of evidence that they would bring, I guarantee that there will be causes that they're not thinking of.
Yeah, well,
or at the very least, numbers that are, I don't know. Okay, I'm speculating too much. I have no idea what numbers or stats he might bring up. I just want to say that I would probably not agree with him right away. But, you know, that's why we have these discussions.
But think about the millions of white Southerners that are in welfare, that are on welfare, right?
Is that an actual stat?
Like, yeah, there are millions of white Southern rednecks that are on welfare, right? Like, if you just look at videos of slums in Alabama, and it's worse than the slums in Compton. Right? It's worse than the projects.
There's people in poverty. There's white people in poverty.
And a lot of white people in poverty. And that's the thing. If it's true that the system is rigged for the success of white people, there shouldn't be white people in poverty. Right? Now, you can say, and you know, it's a whole different argument for you to say that it's rigged for the success of a specific small minority group of people. Sure.
Not specifically based on race.
Not specifically based on race.
Probably more likely based on just who they know and who their family is.
Yeah. Based on whatever, right? Based on a new idea, based on something, whatever it is, right? But there's a specific minority of really rich white people, right? Or really rich people, but it's not rigged for whites because there's millions of poor white people. And there's millions and millions of white people that are in the same boat as millions and millions of Asians and millions of black people.
Yeah.
Right? So this whole narrative, just if you really look at it, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I think the question is, do they exist because of supposed white supremacy? And when I look at the fact that, you know, virtually every corporation and institution bends the knee to diversity, celebrates every single Heritage Month, you know, has all these programs, every single one toe the line for Black Lives Matter. I don't look at that and say, I don't look at that and say conservative white people are in power in this country. As a matter of fact, I'd argue to a large extent, you can talk about, you know, what race or whatever people are, but is like a supposedly conservative white interest in power in America. I would honestly say I think it's the opposite of that.
I want to clarify one thing. You can be liberal and still a white supremacist, right?
Yes.
Like, I would be very clear,
Absolutely.
right? That it doesn't necessarily mean conservative white power is the predominant folks in power. I think it could span a lot of political ideologies and still have these things embedded in how you govern and how you lead and how you make decisions. However, when you talk about bending the knee, that is a wild way, I think, to look at society finally trying in some ways to right the wrongs of its ills.
It's not so wild. I mean, even like your supposedly white politicians, you look at what they did in 2020, they quite literally bent their knee. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire Democrat, basically, caucus in Congress, literally bent the knee to George Floyd and to Black Lives Matter. Like, they quite literally did that.
And that was a bad thing?
I think it was a stupid thing. I think it was just ridiculous pandering
So
to
Black
a
lives do
terrorist
not matter?
movement ran by.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Black lives do not matter?
I do think that Black Lives Matter. I don't support the movement known as Black Lives Matter.
Do you ever say all lives matter?
Of course. As a Christian, I
There it
absolutely
is.
believe
All lives matter.
Absolutely.
Well, let me put this back into some more concrete terms. So I guess to try to understand.
See, he's
I
trying to
love-
explain. Yeah.
I love how the girl on the end, like the second that he started speaking remotely about George Floyd, the protests of 2020, Black Lives Matter, she was like, "So, do you agree Black Lives Matter? Do Black Lives Matter? Do Black Lives Matter?"
Which girl was that? Was that the Taiwanese girl, or was
She's the half Japanese, half Black.
half? Oh yeah,
And then
the thing he even clarified.
And then purple hair on the front also was like, would you say all lives matter? Like, oh, there it is. There what is? All lives do matter. No one life matters more than the other.
Yeah.
Let me just put that out there. Okay?
See, that's the thing. He's against, and he said it, he's against the group. He's against the movement, right? Not the content of what's being said, right? Like to say that you're against the idea of all lives matter just means that, well, what about the half black, half white person? What part of their life matters? Right? Like what if part of that person's life, if black lives really are the only ones that matter, right? What part of that black, half white person's life matters, right? What about the other minorities?
That's my thing about the phrase, not the group, like the institution of Black Lives Matter. I mean, like the actual phrase, the actual belief that Black Lives Matter. Yes, Black Lives Matter. But I feel like for some reason, when people on both the left and right hear Black Lives Matter, for some reason, nobody acknowledges that it's in reality, it's Black lives also matter. We're not trying to say that Black lives are more important than any other one life. Maybe that's what the actual institution is trying to do. I don't know. But the statement itself, Black Lives Matter, does not mean or imply that it's more important, that they're more important than any other race's lives.
Who said they didn't matter?
That's what I feel like. That's what I pick up from the sentiment of people who talk about this, especially when this girl, the half Japanese, half black girl, when she was saying like, "So do Black Lives Matter? So do Black Lives Matter?" I feel like she was like looking for a reason to just go after this guy, or to scope out something about him to get him to admit something.
Yeah,
I feel like just that sentiment alone of trying to look for something that you might disagree with for that one purpose of just to fight or just to debate it, it's pretty unhealthy. It's kind of toxic, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you can tell they just weren't listening to what they're not listening to what exactly he was saying. They're listening to what they think he's saying.
Yeah,
which is because he even clarified, I'm not against the concept of Black lives, mattering. I'm against the movement. I'm against this terrorist group,
Yeah.
Nothing. Right. I mean, that's no, and nobody said that Black lives didn't matter, by the way. There's no politician, no white supremacist. Even if you interview white supremacists, they don't say that Black lives don't matter. So, by the way, if you really want to know what the other side is, if you're really open-minded, listen to white supremacists talk about other races. They're not talking about how they don't matter. They're just talking really what they I don't agree with it, right? I don't want to be pegged as a white supremacist supporter, but what their belief is that there's these other cultures that are trying to change their culture and trying to take away what they believe to be white culture, right?
Yeah.
But that's not saying that these other races don't matter, right? So
it's definitely a way of them saying that they don't matter to them, that the white supremacists don't care about these other cultures.
No, that's not the message. Actually, here's the thing. If people actually listen to what they're saying and not just have this imagination, right? And actually listen to interviews of white supremacist groups, which I don't agree with, right? I think the concept of a white supremacist saying that their white culture has been taken away isn't really understanding of how assimilation works, right? In a country that is so mixed, right? And it's
Yeah,
quite frankly,
that's not exactly assimilation either. That's just straight up white supremacists thinking that their culture, that their livelihood, that their country is being invaded by these other cultures, and they can't allow that because they should be the ones that are on top. That obviously we don't agree with. It's pretty easy to not agree with that, but it's for some reason the sentiment that now people like the liberals on this panel think every white person shares, or just perpetuates this culture in every single possible way, when it's just not true.
Yeah, it's not. Anyways, that purple hair girl gets on my nerves.
I know.
All right.
There's more to come.
The conflict here that you guys are having, what role do you think Asian Americans have as far as the larger injustices and racism that this country has exhibited and has pushed it forward in the 200 years prior to even our arrival? But I guess the easiest way to make it something to talk about is the concept of the model minority myth. When you hear that word, what does it mean to you?
So the model minority myth, after World War II, they used us to separate other people of color. They used our race to say that we were the best race, that we were the model minority because we were the smartest, we got the best jobs, we did these things, and we were able to assimilate to what their idea of what they wanted. They wanted an example to use of people of color that they could then use against all the other people of color. And what they also did is they caused infighting between our communities so that we wouldn't look at the actual problem, which was white supremacy. When I think of the model minority myth, I grew up wanting to be white. I fucking hate that about myself. Like, it is so embarrassing.
Okay, so statistically, it is true that Asians, right, on average, make.
Real quick, did you notice how many times he said they?
Yeah. Who's they?
They did this. They perpetuated it. They wanted this.
Yeah.
They wanted.
What instances? And that's what I'm really curious about. When he said, he said, they caused infighting, right? They put in this model. Number one, who's they, and when did they do it? How did they do it? Give me an example.
I'm fairly sure that they is the white people, because that's just the liberals' bad guy for everything.
Yeah, but who's okay? So maybe the white people is they. How did they do it?
Yeah.
How did they institute? Because number one, most of the colored minorities that he's talking about are the Chinese immigrants that came here to work on the railroads. They're not colored, right? How can a black Southerner or someone whose ancestors were slaves relate to a minority that doesn't even look like them? So that doesn't make any sense. Just that argument itself doesn't make any sense. But I'm gonna push what is the evidence besides this dude talking about it and just mythologizing something that he can't back up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's nothing. He's just saying words. He hated it because he wanted to be white. Maybe you wanted to be white, but nobody else wanted to be white.
Or nobody else wanted you to be white.
Yeah, who wanted you to be white? You chose to want to be white. Right? And just because you hated it doesn't mean that everyone else, number one, doesn't mean that everyone else that wanted to be white or assimilate into white culture hated it. And number two, who are these other people besides yourself that wanted to be white?
And I feel like his own personal example of I fucking hated that about myself, that I wanted to be white. Why? It's not that bad. I mean, it's not that bad to be white.
Yeah.
It's more it's not as bad as you're making it sound. You're acting like you were put in prison and tortured and told that if you don't assimilate to white culture, you're just never going to see sunlight again or whatever. There's just
nobody told him. Nobody.
Yeah,
told
there
him
was
to
nothing there that said he had to do anything.
Uh-huh.
The assimilation, like we've already agreed upon, happens naturally, and some of it happens by you wanting to do it. And when you're a kid, especially, because he talked specifically about being a kid, he's probably even more confused. He's a child. The concept of the full 100% dictionary concept of race and race in society specifically, I'm pretty sure to him as a child, he may have thought he had some idea of what it actually was all about, but he just probably wasn't mature enough to really see it. And unfortunately, it looks like he's still not mature enough to see that his forced upon assimilation wasn't forced upon at all. It's just, again, the environment he grew up in, the fact that he grew up in an area that was predominantly white, apparently, and he's in a country that's predominantly white. It's just reality.
That's the thing. It's like he's not even giving instances of when that oppression, that being forced to assimilate happened. He's not giving any examples whatsoever. He's just, I fucking hate it. What happened? What, a bunch of white dudes paint you white? Like, what, did they hold you down and paint you white? Like, what?
No, he was saying he hated it that he felt like he wanted to be white. That's what he said. He didn't say that he hated it that people were forcing him to be white. He said he hated that he felt like he had to be white. So your question still stands, though.
But okay, so
what was making him feel that way? And have you not grown up enough to now see that nobody was making you do anything? It's just the fact that you were a kid trying to figure yourself out in terms of race and probably gender and probably just other personal factors about you. All these things are all happening at once. You're a kid. You don't fully understand all these things. It's very confusing.
So what was, here's another thing that I kind of want to, I guess, to the same formulation of the question. What was the way where he wanted to feel white? Like, what does that even mean? Like, he wanted to be in the white culture? Like, what is it that he wanted to be white? Because that's very specific, right? You want to be white.
It's very specific, and it's also, it's not racist right away, but it could be borderline racist.
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
because replace white people in that sentence, or replace white in that sentence with black. Like, I wanted to be black so bad. I wanted to feel like I'm black. I wanted to identify with black. What does that mean?
Yeah. What exactly?
I wanted to be Asian so bad. Like, what? I just have to eat rice every day, which I do. But that might.
But what does that mean? Is that eating rice all day? Like, is that does that constitute being Asian? Right? Like, what?
Right.
What is it that what does he mean when he says I want to be white? And he doesn't go on to explain. Right? He's just all emotional because he wanted to be white. What does that mean? Like, you wanted to have white skin. Did you want to have light skin? Right? Like, what is it? And he keeps it so vague.
And these are the type of questions that as soon as we start asking them, we very quickly, I think, will get away from race and skin color and more just about the idea of wanting to belong somewhere and wanting to identify with a bigger group and not especially wanting to stick out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep going.
Make more money, like in terms of medium, make more money, better test scores, get into better colleges, all that stuff. I think the question is, why is that? And I don't know, model minority, whatever that label wants to mean.
That's actually a myth because we cannot be...
Well, no, listen, let me finish my point. We need to observe what makes people successful and unsuccessful. And I think when you look at trends that are generally true in the Asian community, not of everyone, but are generally true, usually you have families that are sticking together. You have, people are taught to work hard in school, not get into trouble. I think that translates to why Asians en masse are successful. And I don't think you have to be Asian or white for that matter to not have kids out of wedlock, not, commit crime, not cause trouble or whatever it is. It's just a matter of common sense. That's what makes people successful. And if that's so-called assimilation, having a nuclear family, buying a house, going to school, whatever it is, then yeah, okay, call me a pro-assimilation then.
I think there's a difference between assimilation and erasure.
Yes.
The way that you're kind of going about it seems like, okay, of course, we want to be in community with people. And I don't think there's a problem with being in community with people from different backgrounds. That's not the issue. It's also embracing the diversity that we inherently have and accepting that and being okay with that and celebrating that.
It's very idealistic, I think, but I think we should acknowledge the fact that diversity, quote unquote, is not a factor that is our strength. It's not a factor that historically or even in the current strengthens societies. People don't come together, form societies, form families, form communities because they have nothing in common. They come together and do those things because they have something in common, right?
You talk about race in such black and white terms. The way you talk about it is it's either with America, whatever your definition of America, or not. You're talking in very black and white terms, and that's actually the problem in discussing race because we're Asian Americans, we're neither black, we're neither white. When you're having a race discussion, you can't be talking about in such like lines.
Yeah.
Everything is in the gray.
The more in common that a society has with one another, the more likely they are to work together and build things in
Okay,
society
I hear
and
you.
not constantly be fighting each other and at odds with each other.
Did you think the Japanese internment was a good thing? Because that was a real assimilation situation. You know what I mean?
No,
Do you
I
recognize
don't.
that the term assimilation has negative
the same
history
thing.
and facts associated with that word?
What was that?
It's not the same thing.
Okay, number one, where did this come from? Japanese internment camps to
Yeah, we were literally
what's the connection?
We were literally talking about assimilation, the benefits, and the work that has to be done to it. And she just comes out of nowhere with internment camps.
Japanese internment camp. Here's the thing, if you actually look at it, if you trace like Chinese people, for example, right?
Mhm.
The Chinese people in America are in the same exact fields as Chinese people in different countries, right? And they dominate, like Chinese people in Indonesia, right? Which, by the way, they have a lot of hate. If you look up the laws against Chinese people in Indonesia and the hate against Chinese people in Indonesia, right, it's pretty damn high. But same thing as any other country, they dominate business, right? They're 10% of the population, but they own a majority of the businesses there, right? So there's a common culture, there's a common trend, no matter where you put a Chinese person. And you have to be a specific type of immigrant to move out of your country, right? And go to a different country, right? So I think by virtue of being an immigrant, right, I think you're gonna do better than the people that are in your home country, just because in virtue of the fact that you are the type of person to move out and start a life somewhere else, right? But having said that, there's also trends. It's not just an American thing, or Chinese people in America, or Black people in America, or Mexicans in America. It's everywhere. You can look at what they go into in different countries, and it's pretty similar. Right? So for someone to say that this I don't even know what this girl's trying to say. I really don't, because she just threw out Japanese internment camps as assimilation. Like, why is that assimilation? What is she trying to say?
We did stop her midway, but I feel like I kind of remember her just bringing it up as white people trying to control / mold Asian Americans and using internment camps as the reason. That's all I could really pick up, because again, like we talked about how vague these liberals can be when they're their points. But yeah, the fact that she just kind of brought out internment camps when we were trying to have a very basic conversation about what assimilation is in a culture, in a society.
So what is internment camp? I mean, that was what, done during wartime, right? When and the argument of internment camps being wrong or not wrong, I mean, I think it was wrong for us to do that, right? Wrong morally. Now, did it have any effect? I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to actually look up that portion of history, right? But to say that's what is that? An example of assimilation? An example of forcing a certain group to assimilate? Like, what is that? Let's watch the rest of this.
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear the rest of it.
Let's hear this lady. You can tell. I told you, dude. You can just open her mouth with a high-pitched voice.
I like how we're just frozen on this guy's face too.
She probably has like a gender studies degree. I don't know. It's just typical type of person. Anyways, all right.
Yeah.
So we do have to be careful in how we choose, because assimilation for people of color have not been good to us historically. That's factual. So let me ask you.
We're discussing the model minority myth and the fact
Japanese
that
internment is a classic example of assimilating Asian Americans.
no,
So
it's
do you
not.
think
It's a classic example of internment. I mean, they intern people.
Why?
Like, it's
Why?
Not,
Yes.
To
Why did they
correlate that to
Why did they intern them? Because they saw them as other. Because they saw them as dangerous.
Not really. Well, yes, they saw them as dangerous because, and I don't agree with it, but left-wing President FDR at the time saw it as a national security risk.
So you're
or
a
whatever.
Republican, right? You're right-wing, right?
I want to make sure that we move this way to keep
Okay.
talking about it. And thank you for all the passion on this. And I think there's a lot to unpack. Joyce.
All right. So, it's so funny Because she's made up her mind about this person, you know, without hearing him, without really listening to what he's saying. She's made up his mind that because he doesn't believe what she believes, he's immediately this bad person, right?
Or a Republican.
A Republican, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love him. He said it's an example of internment. Like that's what it is.
So stupid. Like,
yeah.
How could you realistically come to a debate and use the Japanese internment camps of World War II?
Well, because they probably don't even know that
as an example of assimilation, especially. Like how dumb can you be? To be honest, let's be real. To be honest, bro, I really hope that a lot of people from that video see this one. I don't know how we're gonna do that. We're gonna have to push it pretty hard, but it'd be funny if we get like reactions from those people about this video.
Yeah, but see, yeah, oh my God, so frustrating. Yeah, like in internment camps are examples of internment camps, not examples of assimilation, right? Why didn't we? Okay, if it was an example of assimilation of us trying to assimilate Japanese people, why did it happen only during that time, not before then, and not after then? Right? Like, why did it not continue? Right? And why didn't it happen with other people, Hispanic Americans, right? Or Hispanics, right? Why didn't it happen? I don't even think it happened to Germans in the United States, right? So, you know, what was the reason? You know, and it was specifically because of wartime. If it wasn't because of wartime, we would have continued it after wartime. Right? So this whole narrative just it literally just falls apart when you look at the facts, right? Because she's not even providing anything.
Yeah, I feel like internment camps were brought up earlier in this video. I honestly don't remember anymore. But she's been like waiting to use it as an example of something, and she wasn't sure what example of what was going to be.
She was driving. She's like, she's making a list. She's like, "What can I do? Oh, internment camp. Oh, the Japanese internment camps. Oh, the model minority. Oh my gosh! All right."
Tell me about your feelings about the model minority myth. What does it make you think about?
For me, like, I don't think race should be an issue in anything. Like, when we want to make a decision, we should not put race as a factor. Living in New York City, we're the melting pot of the world, so I haven't actually experienced any of these biases. And if we keep continuing to live on, remembering how history was, we're never going to move further. So I identify myself as American. And in this country, it's the only country where a homeless person can be a millionaire the next day. So based on capitalism, we all have an opportunity, and we should not use race as a factor in either getting ahead or depriving ourselves of opportunities.
I have a question directly related to the fact that you live in New York, right?
Yeah.
And you're Asian women. There have been significant high crimes towards Asian women that were all over the news. Did that affect you? And what were your thoughts on that?
The government is telling us that it's Asian hate, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is
Sorry, I'm going to pause her. She's making a really good point. But notice how she's asking the question to this Asian woman. She's very like tiptoey because it's an Asian woman, but because it's, you know, Vincent, isn't someone that she agrees with. She decided that she doesn't like him. She's attacking everything that he's saying. But when it comes to this Asian woman that disagrees with her, all of a sudden she's tiptoeing, right? She's very I don't know if you noticed, but she's very non-confrontational with this Asian woman.
I still get some confrontational vibes from her, but yeah, I didn't really think about it that way until you mentioned it.
You know?
actually that these people were mentally ill and they were let out.
Or both can be the issue, right?
Yeah,
it can simultaneously exist as issues.
You can't say that it's Asian hate and use that as propaganda.
Propaganda?
I feel like also to just say that these people are mentally ill is a kind of an ableist argument too, because there's plenty of people who are mentally ill who are not going out and killing like Asian people on the street.
All these attacks that you're seeing the videos of in San Francisco, New York City, newsflash, they're not being prosecuted as hate crimes. So the more correct way to look at it is what is the primary perpetrator of violence against Asians overall, right? Because if we talk about these videos, we have to count them in the statistics, and we're not doing that. And when we do that, we find, well, I'll tell you this, the plurality top perpetrator of violence against Asians, number one, is not happening in rural America, and number two, is not being done by white people.
So is it black people that are doing it? Like, is it the black and brown people that are doing it?
No, that's exactly
just inherently violent. Like, just say it.
But see, that's the thing, isn't it black people that perpetrated?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Isn't it black people that perpetuated, right? Isn't it mostly black folks attacking Asian folks when this was going on? This instance they were talking about.
They're about to talk about that. Vince doesn't want to say it out loud, even though it's true.
Vince doesn't want to say it out loud.
Somebody, it wasn't Vince. Somebody just said, "Do you think black people are like inherently violent or something?" And then he brings it up again, but then green shirt over here, liberal, can't close his mouth breather, whatever. He says, "Oh, are they inherently violent?" He brings it up. It's like you hear it. Vince brings up somebody's comment that black people are inherently violent. He repeats it back, and then the green shirt goes on to say that, "Oh, that's what you think. Your bias is coming out."
I didn't say that. All I said
beat around it. Just say it.
If it's not white people or Asian people, what is it?
All I said, I didn't say anything about inherently violent. All I said is that if it's
now you did.
If it's
no one accused you of that, and now you did.
If it's a white,
so like your bias is slipping out
it's
there.
It's clear you want to say it. You should just say it.
Can anyone let me talk here?
When it comes to Asian hate,
such trap. Okay, can you pause
is
real
not
quick?
a white supremacist in New
Correct.
York.
That's all I'm saying.
So that's
It's not a white supremacist. It's mostly, it has been during that instance, a lot of black people perpetrating Asian hate.
Purple hair. Okay, now I'm mad. Purple hair and green shirt have like triggered something inside me that I felt in college a lot. The classic liberal thing to do is to automatically go for, "Oh, you are racist. No, you do have a bias." Immediately start gaslighting you with these accusations, these things that they have already formed in their head that fits your image just because you don't agree with them. And they'll use that as an attack on you to avoid debating at all. Because they're just going to say, "Oh, he's a hateful, racist, bigoted person. We shouldn't even talk with him, and there's no point." But that's even worse. The fact that they don't want to engage in conversation because they just immediately think that they're right, and it's all based off of this image, this stereotype essentially that they've formed in their head of someone like Vince who just doesn't agree with a lot of things that they have to say. That's how thick-headed they are, and it really frustrates me because they'll do that and they think they're making a point. That's the worst part about it, dude. They think they're making a point. They think they're winning the argument when in fact they're just being whiny little children who don't want to have a real conversation.
That's exactly what those two are. Those two especially, and then the half Japanese, half black girl, and then the Filipino dude that grew up in Manila. They're kind of like the bandwagon, but these two are the ones that really don't want to listen, right? Because they've made up their mind and they don't want to have this conversation. Because here's the thing, if you poke at their belief, right, and if you really get into it, right, like, and I wish Vince really got into it and really asked the questions, right? And I get it, it's tough when you're surrounded, right? It's tough when you're in the heat of an argument, but if you really ask those questions, it all falls apart. Right? Who's they? Like, if you ask them, who is this they that you're talking about? Right? And specifically, like, who are they? Like, who's this they? When was the last time they came to you and said that you had to do things a certain way? When was that? Right? And in what instance? Where's the proof? And once you start asking where's the proof, it all falls apart.
Right.
And that's what they don't want to talk about. Right, that's where they don't want to engage.
I realized I had some questions on my notepad here. I think we already kind of went past model minority myth because their conversation just went off the rails from that. Did he the moderator, not the mediator, the moderator, he already asked what does stop Asian hate mean, right? He just asked that?
I don't think so.
Okay, then he's about to. Let's keep playing.
All that I'm saying?
Like, we don't want to blame one race for violence when that's actually not true.
Is it white people? Is it white people?
It is white people.
Are these attacks happening
It is white
in
people.
rural-
I literally looked up statistics.
You do not have to be white to perpetuate white supremacy. No one's saying it's not hard to govern a heterogeneous society, but it is possible to do a lot better than the way that we're fucking doing it right now. It's like,
Did he just say you don't have to be white to perpetuate white supremacy?
It's literally the same argument as that police beating that happened like 3 or 4 months ago, I think in Tennessee. Like all the cops were black and they beat up this one guy who was also black. And the media somehow still turned that around into white supremacy and white nationalist racism against black people.
So
even though in an institution, or I guess just a police department where it's majority black people and where the people involved in this particular event were black, the fact that we live in a white supremacist country, according to them, still makes those black cops perpetuators of white supremacy.
So it's okay. So if it's not white people perpetuating white supremacy, so what does it mean? What does white supremacy mean to them, right? Because white supremacy means it's white, right? It's a white, it's a white person belief, right? And it's perpetuating white people. It's elevating white people, right? Because they're making them. I mean, it's in the fucking name, white supremacy, right? You're elevating white people to supremacy, right? So what does it mean to say that if a black person hurts another black person, it's perpetuating white supremacy? Because they're not white, they're black. Right? So like what does white supremacy mean to them? Right? I'm very curious to see what that is, right? Like what's their definition of white supremacy?
I don't know if they go through it in this video, but I don't think they do. I think they just keep using it as their buzzword.
we've banked on this myth of white adjacency more than this model minority myth of like, instead of aligning ourselves with the black community who've been fighting for racial justice and liberation, right, and acknowledging our own privilege and putting our bodies on the line to fight for these movements, instead we banked on white adjacency, and here we are still being pushed into
First of all, what exactly is white adjacency? Is it working hard, having families?
I don't
understand what the issue is. But then number two, wait, let me finish my point. I think it is gaslighting when, again, the majority of violent attacks against Asians are not being perpetrated by white people to blame white supremacy.
White supremacy as a construct.
Here it is.
Is this idea like that the norm of American is whiteness?
Yes.
That whiteness is the default.
Standard.
That whiteness is the standard that we all ought to aspire to. And we
It's not just talking about KKK.
Yeah.
It's not talking about lynchings.
Okay, so what does that mean? What is whiteness? Like,
yeah. First of all, okay, yes, it makes sense because you live, again, I've said it 1,000 times in this video, we live in a predominantly white country.
But see, that's the thing. It's like, what does whiteness mean? Like, if I told you, hey, tell me what it means to be white.
Mm-hmm.
What are the list of things that make you white? Right? Because he's saying he's perpetuating whiteness. Well, what does that mean? Like, does that mean like on the surface, does that mean that I have to be white in skin color? I don't think that's what it means. But
and Vince was kind of getting to that, or at least he talked about it a bit before he got interrupted. That like, what exactly does it mean? Like, what does white adjacency mean? Like, does it mean you go to work, you have a job, you have a family, you own a car? Like what is it exactly? He was trying to get at that, but then of course the other guy is not going to ever answer that question. And you're right. If we try to make a list of like, what is whiteness? What is it really? Like, take away the historical part of it, okay? Because I feel like if I asked somebody what is blackness,
but
it'd be the same kind of confusing answer. The same, like, it's too general, it's too encompassing. There's no there's no list of things that are particularly black, and there's no list of things that are particularly white, or at least, you know what I mean, right? Every culture has their specifics, has their details. But that's not really what he's talking about. He's talking about some mythical white standard some mythical white standard that the white supremacist country is perpetuating amongst its minorities because that's what they want.
What's the white mythical, right? Even if it's mythical, like even a fucking unicorn, I can tell you what a unicorn is. It's a horse with a horn sticking out of its head, right? That's the list of things that make up a unicorn. right? But what is this mythical? It's not even just mythical. It's vague, and it's like a will o' the wisp. Like you can't talk about it, even though they're saying that if it's that fucking important, if it's so goddamn important and it affects all of our lives, why can't you list out? Give me 5 things that would go in that list of whiteness. Give me 5 things.
And that would specifically only be about white people.
Yeah, that'd be only be about white people, right? Because the answer is, here's the answer. There's nothing, right? What Vince is talking about, families being together, right? Going to your job. That's not a white people thing. That's also an Asian thing, right?
Yeah.
That's also a German thing.
And that's
right?
that's
a Nigerian thing.
And that's part of their argument too, like the fact that Asians are expected to excel in these things, to have to perform the way the white people were, I guess, historically. That's the oppression. That's the sin that's being done on from the white supremacist institution on the minorities. When in reality, that doesn't make any sense. They're simply just standards of a successful life. Later on in the video, I guess I saw more of it than I actually remember, but later on in the video, I know Vince talks about how like the 3 main things that almost guarantee you will never live in poverty are: don't have a baby before getting married, graduate high school, and some other third thing that I don't remember. He will list it though. But they're like very simple things. And that's this list right here, these list of 3 things that he's going to bring up. Is that the whiteness? Is that what these guys are talking about? Because those 3 things are not inherently white.
See, that's the thing. It's like those things are they're good things, and it's really racist for people like purple hair and green jacket to say that those good things that help people be successful are inherently white, which isn't true. It's a racist statement, and they're fucking racist for saying that. Anybody who believes that anything good and successful is only white, that's as racist as a racist statement gets. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree. But they don't see it that way.
Well, they don't see it that way because I don't even think they know exactly what they're saying. I really don't. I really don't think they understand that concept. So, oh my gosh.
It's about a mentality that we have absorbed.
I'm gonna interrupt for a second. Yuling, what's going through your head right now?
Model minority myth, if I'm not wrong, I actually think that Asian Americans did create that first and foremost to push the notion that we are dangerous away. First to say that like, no, we belong here because I promise you we will not cause harm to you. And that has trickled down now into becoming almost a curse. Historically was used first to be like, we're not dangerous, we're American, we're American. But later on it has moved into this sort of weaponized term / almost like idea concept where we get to say like, oh, because we are model minority, like we're not like dangerous and we're not this. And I think about this a lot with class, like a lot of Asian women who are sex workers. Who are we actually taking into account when we think about model minority? And I think that that term really applies to a very specific amount, or that idea of what that looks like is very specific. Because when I think of the Asian Americans that I know, I don't think that they're worried about whether or not they look like model minority. I think they're just trying to survive.
Vish, I see you percolating over there. What's going through your brain?
I don't understand why everybody's so hurt about like being described as a model minority.
Okay, yeah, he was, man, okay, I should have let him talk.
You let him talk?
Let him talk. I think he's just going to say what I was going to say.
For me, it's like, well, I want to be the best. I want to be the smartest. I want to be the toughest. The model minority thing, I've never thought about it because I'm too focused on trying to be a model American.
When I say the word stop Asian hate, what does it mean to you?
Scam.
Okay.
I agree.
Why?
I see it as the same way as the...
I like this guy.
This is a different topic now. Yeah, dude, notice how Vince is surrounded by all the libs on the left. And then over here, we have the Vietnamese lady Joyce, and I forgot this guy's name.
I think Vice definitely did that on purpose.
Yeah.
And then you could tell Vince was a war hawk.
And to be honest, the two black people in the center, they don't really talk that much throughout the video, from what I remember.
The 2 black people.
The Japanese black girl, and then the Hawaiian Asian.
Yeah, the one next to her, I can't tell what he's, because there's some things where he kind of nods a little bit when Vince says, and there's some things that he kind of agrees on. And I think he's kind of split.
Yeah. Here's something that we can talk about real quick before this part of the video starts. What does stop Asian hate mean? What does it mean when somebody says we need to stop Asian hate?
I mean, they believe that people hate Asians and we need to stop the hate towards Asians. I guess that's as simple. That's what that sentence means, right? Like,
yeah. And where did it come from? Like, why is it only now, at least recently? Like,
oh, it's probably because of COVID. It's probably
because of COVID. Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you think
everybody was bullying Asians because? Wait, okay, I don't even think everybody was bullying Asians. I think it was just a small group, a very small group of really loud people getting mad at Asians because they believe it was the Chinese bat virus, right?
And that being said, why is it happening? If Asian hate is happening, let's just assume that it is. Why is it happening?
Why, if Asian hate were happening, why?
I don't want to say it that way because the fact, there were obviously a higher rate of crimes done against Asians.
Well, that's what happened during COVID.
It was already, it's already been talked about before with Vince, how these were not characterized as hate crimes, they're actually just crimes. And so even though they're happening to Asian people, you can't just use that as now that there's a massive problem with people hating Asians, like it's a worldwide epidemic, because it's not.
Yeah.
So I guess what I meant by like, why is it happening? COVID stigmatization is definitely part of it.
That saying didn't exist before COVID. Nobody started saying stop Asian hate, I think, until
no, you're right.
COVID happened.
So I was living in the Bay already in 2020, and I'm pretty sure I didn't start hearing it until like late 2020, early 2021. And then I saw, like, because I live in San Jose and San Francisco, I started seeing billboards about it.
Stop Asian hate. Yeah. I don't think that was I don't think it was a big in any movement. I don't think it was anything until COVID happened.
And I guess another answer I was trying to look at is like, why is it happening? Because people hate Asians. Okay.
Nobody hates Asians.
Nobody hates Asians.
Where are these people? Who are they? Who are these they that
frankly,
they're talking about?
Frankly, it's these criminals who decided they were going to break the law and do something very racist against these Asian people. When the fact of the matter is, that's just this one niche group that was gonna perform a crime anyway, and the fact that they're so mentally ill and not how do I say this, shouldn't belong in society. All right, I'll just put it that way. It's very bold to say it that way, I would think, but they don't belong in society if that's how they actually think. If they think they can just abuse Asians for an idea like that. But is that actually like a worldwide thing? Was it happening across all 50 states, across every country in the world? Is that actually what's happening?
Yeah. No. See, that's the thing. They're really good at getting something that's just happening. It's a very localized event, and then generalizing it to the whole, the whole community, which I'm Asian. I didn't zero experience. I mean, I've had a lot of Asian friends that didn't experience anything. So why is it very unfortunate that things like that happen to older Asian people, especially? Absolutely. Right. But to say that there's, stop Asian hate, that there's this big epidemic of Asians being hated on is just not true. It's just a mischaracterization of something that happened that's very localized and very temporary. I mean, you don't hear it now, do you?
No, not as much, at least.
And this is the thing. They're really good at taking a specific event and then finding how it affects minorities in general, right? And that's what's frustrating, because it's just not true, right? It's just not true. Oh my God. I don't think it's been a while since I've been this frustrated. Because I want to respond, I want to respond, and I really want to genuinely see what goes on in that thought process. What is the reason they believe this? I really genuinely want to see it.
Yeah, but it's a lot of vagueness and circular logic when it comes to debating with liberals. It's what I've quickly realized only recently. And you got to be patient, right? Like, you got to be like Vince. You just got to listen to what they say, as painful as it is, and remember that, you know, they're going to bring up a lot of things that just have nothing to do with the topic, and they're just frankly untrue, but they're going to say it so loud and so confrontational to you that it's going to feel like, oh, I can't argue this, because that's how I feel.
I love Vince's arguments, and I love his demeanor. I think he should have pushed it a little bit more. I think he should have, because a lot of those arguments, really, if you push it and you ask those questions that we've been asking, and again, it's hard, you know, when I get it. I've been in a heated debate before. It's hard, but if you really push those arguments, it just doesn't hold. It doesn't hold. If you and just ask them, where's the proof? Where is the proof?
Like, there must have, I got this from someone else, but there must have been something that happened that made you not only feel this way, but believe everything that you just said, to have such an emboldened flame inside you about it. It had to come from somewhere. There has to be some evidence, some supportive detail that you're just not sharing, or that you don't want to share because you know it's going to fall apart real fast. Instead, you'd rather push with more questions that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, and bringing up things that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, and perpetuating facts. And like we've talked about before, things that sound like they should be right or could be right because of historical factors or some other external force, and feeling like you can't debate it. Like, something that this is kind of different, but something that we've talked about before was how the oppression of Black people up until the civil rights movement and taking away all the racist laws that we had, how the fact that didn't happen until the 1900s, until the middle of that century, is the reason why Black people are so behind from the other cultures in America right now.
See, that's behind in what?
Behind in terms of financial.
It's
success.
Behind in terms of economics, but they're not behind in terms of politics. They've dominated. Asians aren't in politics at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I bring this up because it's something that sounds like it has to be true, that Black people are held back forever, pretty much forever will be held back because of every racist thing that happened in this country. It sounds like it has to be true, but like you and I have talked about, if you really look into the facts, if you look into what other factors have gone into essentially the Black American experience,
there's a lot
hard
more,
to support. It's hard to support and it's hard to actually find proof that, oh yeah, because we had because we had Jim Crow laws, because we had all the laws before the civil rights movement, the Black people were held back up until now.
Yeah.
When in reality,
and
you can't really prove that.
And that's the thing. You need to prove it, right?
Yeah.
Even though it sounds like see, that's the thing. It's morally wrong. But it's not, again, like I said, it's because it's morally wrong doesn't mean that it causally has a connection with a negative effect, right? Like that, those two could be very separate things, and I could name many instances where that's the case, you know. And you have to prove that. I'm not saying that it didn't, right? That's not even what I'm arguing. What I'm saying is you can't assume that that's the case, right? And you can't just say that because it was morally wrong that slavery was a thing that led to Black people being that's the only reason why Black people are behind, right? It's probably very multifaceted, like everything else. And the reality is a lot of liberal folks don't want to have a multifaceted analysis because it's hard and complicated, and it's easier to just believe that there's a white person or the white person that's in the shadows holding them back. It's a lot easier to believe that.
Yeah. And I think I'll end it with this, because you mentioned in terms of politics, in terms of representation in our own government, Black people specifically, but minorities in general, have become more represented. More of them are getting voted in. There are more people in our country who now want to see people of color and minorities in general be in government.
Yeah.
So I bring that up because that's only grown in the last, 30, 40 years, 50 years, let's say. And I feel like the representation of, at least from what I've seen, the representation of Black politicians is, again, this is one of the things that sounds true, but maybe is not true, I've seen more Black politicians come to power than Asian politicians come to power.
I mean, that's absolutely, you look it up. That's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
That's historically true. Asians just have not meddled in politics. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because we meddled in working. Right? That's not a slight, that's just the reality. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like and then, by the way, I think Asians should have spoken up more. Right? But Asians have this, oh yes, bow, 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 right? And that's why, right? There were no Asian riots when Asian hate was going on. There were no Asian riots,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I feel like a lot of them could also see through it.
Yeah, but
hopefully.
It's not like when Black Lives Matter was happening, right? Stop Asian Hate didn't have riots. Why? Because we were too busy working, right?
Man, that's going to be problematic for you if it's taken out of the wrong context. But I hear what you're saying. I totally hear what you're saying.
Problematic for me, yeah. And here's the thing: it's the fact that some cultures, historically have just been more involved in politics than other cultures, right? And I'm not saying, and that's the thing, there's more to life than economics, right? If your culture has been focusing on economics for a very long time, of course they're going to be more economically ahead. But if they've been focusing on politics the whole time, of course they're going to be more politically ahead, right? There's more Asians that go into the STEM field than there are Black people.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it, right? Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but if you have more people going to the STEM field and the STEM field pays more, right, than someone that has a literature degree teaching, right? Now, I'm not saying nobody should be teachers, but that's the reality, right? Culturally speaking, it's just what's been going on.
Yeah. Man, I used to think that to be honest, I know it's a little weird, but I used to think that Asian parents were really good about teaching their kids, I guess, very conservative values just on a face level, but also being very in tune with themselves in terms of what they dedicate themselves to. And to be more specific, to have a good work habit, a good idea of what it takes to actually succeed. I feel like Asian parents have always been very good at that because I see a lot of very successful Asian people and a lot of them who are good in the field that I work in, which is also electronics. And so when I see people like in this video, and I think back to some people I even met in college, I'm not going to name them off, of course, but if I think back to just how I would see some Asian people talk and how they perceive the world around them, specifically in terms of politics and just societal issues like racism, it was eye-opening because I never thought that I would hear Asian people talk that way. And I'm only saying that now because it's fully in line with a liberal ideology. So it's not just that Asian people are following a liberal ideology, it's the fact that a liberal ideology has reached so many people in general.